Hello, BookTube. I have 10 more random books for you today to chat about just a bit. We're going to try to bear down and focus. We're going to try to bear down and focus and talk about these books. And we're going to start with a classic murder mystery, and a classic murder mystery author, Mary Roberts Rinehart. This is her novel, The Album. This is a later cover. These mass market paperbacks, there was a string of these mass market paperbacks that came out in the 1990s that had these just incredibly distinctive cover artwork. Unfortunately, they weren't well made at all. They weren't good, strong paperbacks. I recently found a very old, a 70 or 80-year-old paperback of this thing from the Brattle Bookshop that was one of those old pocket paperbacks that has sewn binding. So it's going to be really hard to make it fall apart, and the pages don't brittle, they don't yellow at all. And this is Mary Roberts Rinehart's mysteries, I think, are undersold. She is not remembered now as well as, for instance, Agatha Christie, and she should be. And this, I think, could best be described as an anti-cozy mystery. it's the opposite of the kind of mystery that has an idyllic, never-changing, cozy setting for relatively bloodless, relatively trivial crimes. Instead, the setting here is a little enclave, kind of a close of buildings, that has walled itself off from the passage of time in the outside normal world. Not in any mystical way, but it's a very ingrown community of weird people who've gotten weirder over time the less they have to do with the real world. And when murder strikes in that community, it is not only surprising, but grotesque. This is an extremely bare-knuckled murder mystery in terms of grotesqueness, as I think is signaled by this cover. This cover has, you won't know until you read the book, but it has a number of items on it that telegraph parts of the book. Mary Roberts Rinehart's books are often oddly unconcluded. They will have moving large elements in them that you as a reader definitely want to see explained. But an explanation is not a conclusion. And they're wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. The album is absolutely wonderful. It's not my favorite of hers, but it's wonderful. What do we have next here? Okay, this is a romance novel. This is a Regency romance novel. This is Beth the Bet, and this is Any Rogue Will Do. We have a modern Regency romance here, which is why you have the heroine is wearing a football field of cloth. In modern Regencies, the covers are actually quite nice, but they have two factors that usually distinguish them. One is that the woman is wearing colors she would never wear in the actual Regency, and also miles and miles of it. Just enough cloth to cover an entire sports stadium. And the other quality that you'll notice right away in modern Regency covers is that the man is half naked. And in this case has Soloflex muscles that no man who wasn't a blacksmith would have had in the Regency era. In fact, it's not a question that they wouldn't have had the time or the inclination to do it. It would have been socially stigmatizing for a man to look like that. Broad-shouldered, sure, but not muscular, not hard-working muscles like tradesmen would have. This doesn't matter. We're not judging a book by its cover, and I am also not hung up on quibbling with modern Regencies. I like them quite a bit. And this is the story of a young woman who, if I'm remembering it correctly, a young woman who tries to do the Regency thing. You are brought up in a good household. You are going to come out to society, to the ton. You're going to come out to proper society. You're going to have a debut and make the rounds of parties and galas and routs and whatnot. And the goal of that will be for you to secure a husband. And that's your season. You'll have a season in London, and there will be a complimentary season out in the countryside. And it's hoped by you and by your family that will be enough, that season, your season will be enough to secure a husband. If it doesn't, then you update your dresses, update your dance maneuvers, update your piano playing, and you will have a second season. You will go into the season of routs and balls, the second time, and you'll just keep doing that until you get a husband, or until you are too old to keep doing that with any kind of grace, in which case, in the parlance of the day, you will be on the shelf, or up on the couch, as the bean is. And our main character here she does the right thing. She tries a London season, and it goes horribly. Not only is she bored by how stupid it is, but a nobleman, a well-born gentleman, seemingly intentionally brings scandal on her, has people talking about her in the exact rotten way, the way you don't want people to talk about you. So she says, the hell with it. I tried it and it was a disaster, so I won't do it again. I'll go about my own business. I have homes, I have estates, I have a loving family. I won't bother with it anymore. But very quickly in the course of the novel, pressure is brought to bear on her in a way that she can't ignore, to accept the advances of a man she does not like at all. And she comes up with a standard solution to this, a standard in romance novels, which is that the way to protect her from his advances is if she's already affianced. And the only person who seems available to be that fake fiancé is the man who ruined her reputation the one time she tried to come out into society. So the book throws them together again. They're each a little older and also a little wiser, and they have curiously complementary memories about their first encounter, and it's delightful. I don't know how much of Bethany Bennett I have read since I read this book. This is not a new book. This is not 100% sure how old this is, but it's not new. And I'm not off the top of my head remembering. I wouldn't at this point remember with crystal clarity, but I'm not at this point remembering how much Bethany Bennett I've read, but I really enjoyed this one. Okay, then we have Marcia Bonta. This is Appalachian Summer, where this is natural history, really, really good natural history, done in a very familiar template, where she's in western Pennsylvania. She's on 600 acres, something like that, 700 acres. So she has a neatly graded biome to observe. River bottoms, hollers, forested woodlands, temperate regions, that sort of thing. And that's what she does. That's what this book is. It's just her looking at the things that share that land with her, the non-human animals that share that land with her, and what they do and what they're like. And it's lovely, absolutely lovely. Wish I had a print copy of this, or even an e-copy. I have this in a ledger, but that's all. Okay, then we have the historian Adam Zamoyski. A lot of you have, if you've read popular history, you've probably seen his work or maybe wanted to read it. He's very good with the Napoleonic era, and this is an earlier book of his. This is a musical biography. He himself is musically inclined. I am not. So musical biographies are always a bit of a dodgy proposition for me, because that's the two ways they can be written. Either for a general audience that is more and more musically illiterate, or for a musically literate audience, and then you're going to write off everybody else. Are you going to include music scores in your biography? Are you going to discuss them in technical terms? Well, you can see right away that if you're going to do a biography of a musical genius, it would be a very good idea, a very good approach to do that, to include the music and talk about it on an almost professional level. But you'll lose a lot of readers that way. And Zamoyski does a great job in this book. This is his biography of Chopin. Prince of the Romantics? Yeah, Prince of the Romantics. This has a lot of really penetrating analysis of Chopin, of his music. But there's lots of, any of you who've ever read his history will know, there's lots of good narrative history here as well, with his stardom and his personal travails. A very good classical music biography. Okay, all right, then we have a novel. This is contemporary fiction, although it's 50 years old now. It's Creator by Jeremy Levin. In my opinion, a great novel of the latter half of the 20th century. If I made a list, if I made a post-1950s American literary canon for fiction, this novel would be on it, even though it hasn't been in print in 50 years and no one's ever heard of it. Unfortunately. I mean, it's a shame. It was fairly intelligently reviewed, fairly widely. It even had a movie adaptation with Peter O'Toole, but that didn't save. That didn't save. It didn't serve to help at all. This is the story of Harry Walper, who is, among other things, trying to regrow his dead wife in a vat because he loved her too much to live without her, and cannot get past that fact. This book was written at the very dawn of the very beginning of the public conception of anything like cloning, and is full of the science of the day on what you could do along those lines. But Harry Walper is also the creator of Boris Lafkin, who appears to be an angry character on paper only, a created character, or Harry Walper is imagining, Boris Lafkin may be imagining Harry Walper as some kind of vengeful and neglectful god. It's not 100% clear, I don't think, no matter how many times you read the book. I've read this book probably more times than anybody in the world. And it's still not clear to me, but in a wonderful way. In an absolutely wonderful, I don't need it to be clear. Okay. All right, this next one is a Penguin Classic. This is the Penguin Classic edition of Magna Carta that King John engaged in with his unruly barons as a kind of regulatory device on the whims of the king. It's since taken its place over the last 1,000 years as a fundamentary document of human freedom, of human rights. It didn't start off life that way, but it's easy to interpret it that way. It also codified a whole bunch of ideas into the wording of law that had not been codified that way in 1,500 years. And it's really interesting to read on its own. But this is, the Penguin edition is by David Carpenter, and oh my, it is so much more than just Magna Carta. So much more. There is an enormous introduction here that is brilliant. And there are enormous annotations and elaborations on Magna Carta. This is exactly what Penguin Classics should do on a subject like Magna Carta, but so often don't do. For instance, they've never had a volume of Darwin's Origin of Species that does this for Origin of Species. They famously had a big Penguin Classic Deluxe edition of Domesday Book and did not do anything. They didn't introduce it. They did not describe what it was. They did not annotate it in any way. This is magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. It is the one-stop shop for Magna Carta. And while I'm mentioning it, I might as well mention David Carpenter also, he went on to do a 2-volume biography of King Henry III. He rather than squish things, he split them up into 2 volumes from Yale University Press. And I imagine they would be pricey, but they are amazingly good. It is an amazingly good biography, the best biography, obviously, of King Henry III, who's not an easy monarch to write. It's easy to understand why a thorough biographer would want to split his reign, and it's easy to understand where they would split it. But it's not easy to do, and Carpenter makes it look easy. His biography of Henry is not only great, but also wise, insightful, and sometimes even funny. I mean, there are large parts of Henry's reign that are a little bit ridiculous, and he sees that, which not every biographer does. Most previous biographers a century ago came at Henry III from a very pious angle for obvious reasons, and that ruins the show. So I wanted to recommend those while we're at it. Then we can go to this next one here is by Paul Coppin, and it is from the heyday of the so-called New Atheists that some of you may remember, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, writing these books, very popular books, million-selling books, about attacking organized religion. And those sparked a number of books defending organized religion. And Paul Coppin wrote one called "Is God a Moral Monster?" And it's absolutely hopeless. Of course, it's a hopeless task. And I give him credit. This is a very readable book. It's predictable, but it's very readable and very, no pun intended, spirited. It's just engaged in a completely losing cause, a completely lost cause here. So there's only one way to get out of this if you are a Christian apologist. There's only one way, and that is to say that much as heaven is a dimension, a realm that exists, but that is nowhere near our own realm, a parallel but not at all similar dimension. The only way you can do this, answer this question in the negative as an apologist, is to say that that morality also has an invisible dimension that isn't anything like the morality in this dimension, and therefore it's possible that when God, who is a being of that other dimension, is touching this dimension, he is trailing along a morality that looks confusing to humans at the very least. That's the only way you can do it. You can't. The answer to this question is yes, if you are talking about ordinary morality that we understand in the world today. And you don't have to go to, the picture on the cover, of course, is famous. It's the sacrifice of Isaac. It's a father being told by God, take your beloved son up to the top of a mountain and kill him for me, for a blood sacrifice. And the father in the story agrees. He agrees to do that. Doesn't hesitate, doesn't argue. He takes his son up to the mountain preparing to slit his throat for God. And at the last minute is told by an angel, oh no, wait, we were just testing your faith. You don't actually need to do that. It's not, this all-powerful ruler of the universe still needs something to die. But there's a ram whose horns are stuck in a bush over there. You can go and grab it and kill it instead. Something still has to die on this altar for this God. But it doesn't have to be your son. So aren't you grateful? And that is often the story that anti-theists and also religious apologists, they often go to the sacrifice of Isaac because it is so quintessentially awful. It is so quintessentially horrifying as an in situ example of God being a moral monster. But I don't think you need to do that at all. This is a very human-centric example. I imagine that's why people go to it. But I always think about the Noachian flood, which I should parenthetically point out here, did not happen. Okay? As long as we're clear on that. It is obvious mythology. It did not happen. But look at the story. I mean, there are some brands of Christian, not anywhere else in the world, but I live in the most theocratic country, the most religiously fundamentalist Christian country in the world. And in this country, 100 million people believe that Noachian flood story is literally true. And if you do believe that, well, the story is that God looks at the earth and sees that everyone is wicked, except for this one man and his family. So he tells them to build a massive ark and take a very small selection, 2 of every animal on earth, of every kind of animal on earth, and 7 of every livestock animal, bring them on this thing because this God is going to flood the earth. I don't think schnauzers were on the ark, baby. I don't. Although that would have kept all the other animals in line. There you go. Oh. 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 All right, focus. What was I saying? Oh, right. Right. Animals can't sin. I don't know what sin is. In Christianity, it means you're offending God. But animals can't do it. Babies can't do it. Fetuses can't do it. And yet they all die in the Noachian flood. Every single African elephant, every single polar bear, every single hummingbird, except 2. All of the animals, all of the babies, all of the little children running around and playing, they all die. They're all wicked. That is surely planetary genocide is the worst moral monstrosity that this character could create. And there's no getting around that. There's no way to say it. Anyway, this is well done, believe it or not. It's enjoyable. It's an utterly losing cause. Then we have science fiction. This is Nor Crystal Tears by Alan Dean Foster with this lovely old cover. This is, Foster did the Tar-Am Krang and Blood Hype. He did a few novels in which a future community of human beings in this science fiction setting of his has dealings with an insectoid race called the Thranks. And it eventually occurred to him to write the beginning of that, what was humanity's introduction to the Franks? And I would have read it anyway. I love Alan Dean Foster, absolutely love him. But I have to say, he has a talent for beginnings. He really does, which is kind of ironic considering how many sequels this guy has written in his life. He has a talent for beginnings. I think that's even true in his novelizations. He's written a million novelizations of movies and TV shows and whatnot. And when the novelization that he's writing is a novelization of an origin story, it's usually much better than the two novelizations on the left of it or the two on the right of it. And the same thing is true here. The same thing is also true for, he had, in addition to the Franks novels, he also had a series of novels about two characters called Pip and Flinks, a boy and his dragon. And eventually it occurred to him, around the same time as Nor Crystal Tears, eventually it occurred to him to write the origin story of Pip and Flinks as well. When they met, how they met. That was a story called For Love of Mother Not. And it also is among the best things he ever wrote. This is wonderful. Very, very down-to-earth, no fuss, no muss science fiction, but very good. Then we have Fergus Millar and Eric Segal. Both of these people have come up on this channel for their translations in the latter half, and also for the former, for his classical writing, his classical history. And here they teamed up on a book called Caesar Augustus, 7 Aspects. Not a proper full-dress biography of Augustus Caesar, but not much off either. A really wonderful book. I had a copy of this. Once upon a time, I had a print copy of this, and I think it died in a flood. But either way, I know I have never seen it in the wild again, never. And God knows what it would cost online. I'm sure there's no ebook of it. But Augustus Caesar is a fascinating figure, and we know an enormous amount about him. So this is a terrific book. Their talents, their writing talents, really match up well. Then we have this is a tough one. This was a tough one. It's fascinating. I think still the best book on the subject, but it's tough. It's a tough subject to read about. It's a book called Stuff, and it's about compulsive hoarding. Not the usual joking refrain that I get from people who will say they'll have a stack of magazines on a table, and they'll say, "Oh my God, I'm a real hoarder. I got to deal with them." Here, can we get some light there? Not that. Of course, that's not what this book is about. I don't know how many of you have ever actually seen an example of true hoarding. But it's horrifying. It will chill your blood to see. It's so often the case that when we walk around in the day, when we talk to people at work in the next cubicle over, or say hello on a bus or something like that, it's entirely possible that those people are carrying around with them, like Marley's chains, some sort of psychological problem of some kind or other. That's entirely possible. It's not as likely as the 21st century would have you believe. Your mental health is not all that big a deal. You're pretty mentally healthy. The 21st century wants everybody to believe that they are an intensely medicatable invalid. That is not true. It's no more true now than it was a century ago or half a century ago. But most of those psychological problems, even the ones that are real, are hidden. And the thing that causes the sharp intake of breath when you encounter genuine hoarding is that it's physical, it's manifest. You're looking at a severe psychological problem that isn't visible when you don't see it, when you don't see that manifestation. When you meet the person at work or on the bus or on the sidewalk, you would never guess. And then you walk into their home. It's very rare that a hoarder will invite you into their home because they know perfectly well what you're going to see. But if they do, and you take that invitation, it will stop you. No matter how well adjusted, no matter how happy or kind you are, you will freeze for a good solid minute because it's not a stack of magazines on the coffee table at all. It's every single inch of space filled, and not just filled with books, filled with junk. With junk. Not a question of one man's trash is another man's treasure. No, just junk. Just 10-year-old wrappers from the takeout place. I don't want to get rid of it. I might need it. So I'm not going to get rid of those. I'm going to leave them. I'm going to put them in a pile somewhere. 20-year-old newspapers. that are molded into each other. So they cannot be read anymore. They can't be separated from each other. They cannot be used in any way. It doesn't matter. You point out to the hoarder, at least this 50 pounds of newspapers that you have stuffed in the machine that used to be your washing machine, they're not usable anymore. They're not readable anymore. They are literally compost. Why not? You're not. You have a psychological problem, but you're not crazy. You can look at them and see that you're never going to be able. No one could read these things anymore. So why not haul them out of there and throw them in the garbage outside? They won't do it. They just won't do it. And this is about that. This book is about that. So of course it has the usual horror stories, the Collier brothers and a few other famous hoarders, and it tries to get at the mentality, why this is, what it is. This is one of the terrifying things about the hoarding impulse, is that unlike some other psychological problems, the people who have this are usually high functioning. They're usually able to hold down a normal job, have authority over other people, go to events, go to movies, go to friends' houses. They're usually able to do all of that. That's why it's so horrifying when you get an invitation to their home, is that you had no idea that they were squeezing down corridors of 15, all the way to the ceiling, 15-foot tall stacks of crap, and you are squeezing down pathways to the bathroom, to the one burner on the stove that is not covered, the one burner on the stove that will still work. You would have no idea, no suspicion that that was true until you see it. And this book really puts you in that room, in those kinds of rooms. So, read at your own risk, I guess is what I'm saying. Then we have T.H. Fehrenbach. This is his book, This Kind of War. I think this might be a reprint cover. This is a classic. I say classic, but I don't know that this is still in print. A classic study of the Korean War. Really unsurpassed in some ways. So if I don't know many people who are interested in the Korean War. I don't know many people who make a study of it. But if you can find a copy of this book, it might not look like this. The copy that you find might not look like this, but it's well worth it as a place to start for the Korean War. Lots of personality, lots of really detailed military descriptions. And then we can finish up, because this video's gone on long. We can finish up with Brendan Gill, who will be known to you, if his name is known at all, it'll be known to you because he had a mega bestseller about 70 years ago. He wrote a book called Here at the New Yorker, which was all about his days at the magazine The New Yorker in its formative years. All the personalities that he met there, all the writers, all the editors, all the adventures that he had. It, I think, surprised him. I think it certainly surprised his publisher, just how big a bestseller that book was. In hardcover, and then again in mass market paperback. Just an enormous bestseller. But Brendan Gill also had aspirations to be a writer. He didn't ever think that his literary fame was going to be here at the New Yorker. That would never occur to him, and he wouldn't have liked it. And he wrote a book. He had a collection of stories of contemporary fiction called Ways of Loving. And it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I have many thoughts on Here at the New Yorker, for instance, for the seismic effect that book had. I believe that the reason that we don't consider John O'Hara, for instance, to be as good a writer as Cheever, or if not as good a writer as Hemingway, is because of that book. I believe that's Brendan Gill got the whole literary world, and outside the literary world, obviously. If you sold 3 million copies of your paperback, you're reaching a lot more than just the literary world. He got the whole world laughing at O'Hara as a pompous buffoon. And a whole bunch of other figures at the New Yorker fared almost as bad. And that set my teeth on end anyway, even though Here at the New Yorker is a tremendously enjoyable book. But it's only when you read Brendan Gill's fiction that you start to realize where some of that animosity might have come from. And that's what you get in this book. Some of these stories are effective. Others of them, most of them, are ham-handed, extremely gimmickry, extremely amateury. You read anything in here, and then you read Appointment in Samara by his nemesis, by O'Hara, and there won't be any question in your mind at all who is the better writer, and it's a wide margin. And maybe Gill knew that. Maybe he knew that. Maybe that was working on him on some level when he decided to settle scores with his one best-selling book. Ways of Loving did not. It was not a bestseller. And it is good. There are things in it that are good. There are things in it that, if the moral censors of the 21st century ever find this book, they won't allow it to be reprinted. Oh my God, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The casual racial slurs in here alone, but also the casual sexism in here, it will jump out at you. In the 21st century, as a reader, it will jump out at you. I think, in a good way, at least for the people who are watching this video. I can't be held accountable for the rest of the world that pretends to read. But for the people watching this video, those words and phrases and ideas are going to leap off the page at you. And that's good. That's a good thing. Because we don't want to be casually racist or sexist. No good person wants to be those things. You don't want there are all kinds of ways to write effective fiction without doing that. Without doing that. The fact that they jump off the page at you is a sign that our consciousness has become more sensitive. That sort of thing. Our collective consciousness has, and that's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. The reason that I say that I'm talking about only the people who are watching this video is because you would keep reading. You would say, "Wow, okay, that couldn't be done today." But that won't be a deal breaker. You'll be paying attention instead to, okay, apart from that, is this any good? Which is what readers should do. But of course, in the 21st century, a huge swath of readers don't do that. They see words they don't like, and like 8-year-olds, they say, "Well, I saw a bad word, so burn this." And maybe, if you've got a free hour on the weekend, burn the author as well. Real readers, of course, don't say that, but nevertheless, I think that those usages alone mean this will never be reprinted. I don't think, but also, it doesn't deserve to be reprinted. It's only good. John O'Hara deserves to be reprinted, but Brendan Gill does not. Well, here at the New Yorker probably deserves to be reprinted because it is very amusing. But his fiction, maybe not. But anyway, I've wandered all over creation here, so I'm gonna wrap this up. You got some books, you got some Frida yoga. That's gonna have to do. And I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.